Good evening, everyone out there in Radio Land. It's once again that very special time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it's that time of the week where, and especially in this weather, we all gather around the fire, turn on the radio, and listen to me and my lovely co-hosts call out the BS, either if it's coming from the corporate mainstream media, our capitalist system, the myriad number of lying politicians that exist in this country and all over the world, and quite generally try to analyze and bring you that news at a local, statewide, national, and international level with a deft lefty analysis. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Now, as always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may, in fact, turn out to be. So, welcome back. A quick apology to our YouTube listeners. I haven't gotten last week's episode uploaded yet. There's some wibbly, wobbly, timey-wimey stuff that happened. Not really interesting or worth getting into, but we will be uploading that as well. So we got a lot to talk about this week. As some of y'all know, and man, we're going to be spending a lot of time later in the show talking about Bolivia. Honestly, by the time that this episode drops on YouTube tomorrow, the situation could be radically different. Everything is moving very, very quickly. That said, I will at least try to bring you some bad news and some good news from Latin America. Yeah, it's basically another CIA-backed coup. You've heard that story, once. You've heard it 1,000 times. However, Lula is out of jail, which is some genuinely good news. We also got some local stuff to talk about. Statewide level, Gretchen Whitmer has passed a new bill to help folks dealing with domestic abuse. A local county treasurer is exonerated, at least for some crimes. There's still all the capitalism and racism, but we'll talk about that later. I think we're going to start off today's show, though. Actually, we have a guest on the program. And we're basically going to be talking about, the best way I can describe it is some white nonsense. I'll go ahead, I'll just introduce you and you tell the folks at home, like, who you are, where you're from. So everyone, this is a local artist here in the city of Kalamazoo, Maya James. Maya, if you could say hello to the people out there in Radio Land.
Hello, everybody. I'm Maya. I'm a local artist.
Yep. It's a very, very good one at that. Done a lot of commissions for folks, especially in the Vine neighborhood. I know you got a graphic novel you're working on too, right?
Yeah, it's actually through a small publisher run by women of color and based in Detroit. It's called Mamul Press. And then through that, I'm doing residency with the National Arab American Museum, and we're going to be doing some events over there and a little residency where I finish my book and start publishing it.
Wow, that's great. And yeah, it's like, as you see, you can find Maya and her artwork around town. I know sometimes you have your wares up at the DMNY and various other events. But now we're talking about the good stuff. Let's dive into some of the aforementioned nonsense. So, I'd like to just real quick kind of paint a picture of, I guess you can just kind of tell us the story. So, you're originally from Traverse City. This has to do with some work that you did on a book project up there. Mm-hmm. So, could you tell us a little bit, like, what was the genesis of this project? What went wrong? And kind of when did you realize that basically it wasn't going the way that you expected or wanted it to?
Yeah, I believe that I was like 18, 19, around that age when I started this project with this woman. She was my 4th grade teacher, and she had reached out to me through Instagram, kind of saying, hey, I want to do a children's book and I want you to illustrate it. And I was an up-and-coming artist, and this was the first time I was being offered like a really good amount of money for my work, so I signed on to this contract with her to do her children's book based on the 19th Amendment. Now, that being said, there were a couple things about that project that seemed like red flags for me while I was working on it. The first of which was that she wanted the main character to be based on me. And I didn't really question why that was, or why she wanted me to be a part of it so deeply, until eventually throughout the project, when I started putting Black civil rights leaders that had to do with the 19th Amendment and the development of the Equal Rights Amendment, she had me take all of them out of the book, so one at a time.
And so did you kind of just start to notice a pattern? It's like
it was 5 different edits. Yeah. She made me take out Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Angela Davis, Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass. So like pretty much every time I put a Black civil rights leader that had a lot to do with like equal rights and women's rights, she made me take them out. Pretty much.
Ooh. Okay. Well, yeah, that is definitely a red flag. Did she ever give you any kind of concrete reasoning for that?
Yeah, she said that the publisher and her thought that adding these characters was off the topic of women's rights. So basically, it was making me choose between being a feminist and being a Black person, and I can't choose not to be a Black woman. And I'm an intersectional feminist, so I kept asking why she made me do this, and eventually she just like kind of put the foot down and said like, well, you know, I have you contracted, you have to do this, so I did it. But it doesn't feel right that now they're doing this like really big media stint about how I'm like so inspired by her as a civil rights leader.
Whoa, the teacher that made you excise all of these important figures. And again, like, you know, people that you mentioned like Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, like Angela Davis, you know, those are like some key figures in both 19th and 20th century, you know, feminism. You know, you wouldn't have had a lot of those movements without those people on the ground actually doing the work.
Right.
So I know this has been like long-standing, but also recent. So correct me if I'm wrong. So I think like the book is kind of going forward with like it's either like in the process of getting published or something like that. And how did it come to your attention that it was basically trying to be that you were basically being tokenized?
I'm being tagged and everything on Facebook now by her publisher, and so I thought, well, also there's the whole ordeal with the National Writers Series, where basically a representative from the Traverse City wing of the National Writers Series, after I just decided, since they're going to silence me and how I feel about this book, because I had talked to journalists like the Record Eagle about this and said like, hey, she made me take all of these Black people out of the book except for me, you know, who is basically a bland, faceless character who's just like throughout the book that has nothing to do with the development of women's rights at all. So when I was commenting on all of these things, since I was being silenced by journalists and media, the National Writers Series reached out to me when I commented on her event through that, when I told them to untag me. And she said, I'm untagging you, but I'm also taking your comments down because I don't want to create backlash.
This is the National Writers people?
Yeah, the National Writers Series branch of like Grand Traverse. Yeah. So I had signed up for an event but agreed to an event in Grand Traverse with the National Writers Series, but I actually canceled all those events, and I told them that I didn't want to be a part of it anymore, because basically when I had reached out to them and said, hey, this isn't right, it's not right that you're silencing me, I had a lot to do with this book as well, they basically said, good for you, we're still going to delete your comments. So
well, yeah. You know, one that's, you know, because I was really thinking about this. It's like, you know, this is me speaking less as a radio host and more as an organizer. It's like, well, Traverse City isn't really, I don't have too many connections up there. Like, I think I have literally one. But the national, sorry, not Guild National Writers Series. So I would assume then that they operate outside of Traverse City. They have like a broader reach.
Yeah, and like it was like word for word, they did say "good for you," and I think like their whole need to defend like the whatever the situation is kind of going against like the intent of protecting the people who are creating these books, right? So I don't understand.
So let's talk about like some of the deeper. I think there's deeper questions that come up when. So to me, it sounds like, and this isn't the first time I've heard this. This is kind of like an issue with some white feminists view like there's this kind of default mode of feminism. Anything's not talking about like kind of quote unquote white feminism is somehow off topic. How much do you think that kind of plays into it? And why do you think there's this kind of willful ignorance on their part around like, because this isn't excuse me, it seems pretty common sense to me. Like, you're the artist, you wanted these people included, they deliberately deleted like pretty much all the like black historical figures that you're talking about. So
every single one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like what do you think? What do you think? Kind of the role or how this played out ties into some of those issues around quote unquote like white feminism.
Frederick Douglass was the first feminist, like at least the very first male feminist on record, and that was a black man. Throughout history, and you can read this in books like Patricia Hill Collins' like Black Sexual Politics, or Angela Davis's Women, Race, and Power. You can find out in these books that throughout the history of labor unions, even if we're talking socialism and like the Socialist Party, historically women's American labor unions have been exclusionary of black people, and all black labor unions have been accepting of women. So if we're talking about me having to choose between being black and being a feminist, that's irrelevant. Black people have had feminist foundations and structures for such a long time. I do believe that patriarchy is an act of racism. So the fact that they're telling me that, like, I have to choose between representing an equal rights amendment for women or an equal rights amendment for black people is completely irrelevant. And that's why intersectional feminism and intersectional politics is so important today, because we are neglecting from within socialist activist spheres like the existence and like the special situations that like many different marginalized people experience. It's not just black women. So it's kind of offensive to everybody if you're saying that you can't be black and be a woman at the same time. I'm constantly black and a woman and biracial at the same time,
Yeah, and so I kind of want to bring it down. So here's a question I kind of want to expand on a little bit too. So some might say like well, this was a book deal out of Traverse City. A lot of people know that's a little bit more racially homogenous than Kalamazoo is. Do you think that kind of plays into it, the fact that, to a great extent, like even a lot of the quote-unquote liberals up there, they don't have a lot of day-to-day exposure with people who are not keyed into like white supremacy? Yeah.
I mean, it's a town that was like founded among white flight, like when predominantly black neighborhoods had to flee the south and came up to the north, like people from white suburban areas got freaked out and moved north and created these tiny towns. And I mean, I grew up there, right? So and it's very interesting, like living here now and having escaped and being able to
not that Kalamazoo is somehow a post-racial utopia, but that's just
no, not at all. But to say that it really is, when it's 99.9% white according to the census, and you're the only person of color in a sea of white, like you really do stand out, and it really does feel like a different era. And so moving here was very different from me, because I was so used to being treated like the blackest person there. And a lot of people of color that go to Traverse City experience this even on vacation, right? But for me, now I've moved here. I'm a Kalamazoo artist, and I feel like it was a violation of my work from like after I felt as though I could get through and over that situation. And that's why it's so important for rural areas to still be held accountable, you know, like it doesn't really matter.
Well, you know, I personally, I'd like to see, you know, I'll help you organize a teach-in and we'll bring it up to Traverse City. Just to see where we can go with that. But you know, I guess I'd like to think a little bit too about, you know, talking about like, you know, so you as an artist, so I guess like kind of just really parcel out like, you know, fundamentally they like took your work, used it without your expressed consent for a project that you imagined was going to be significantly different. Do you have any particular recourse, or is it just kind of like locked up in the contract?
I contractually agreed to edits, right? And the edits had to be at the, you know, basically what she wanted. So I had to make those edits, and I had to take out entire pages in certain cases, you know, and it was a little heartbreaking when she would tell me to, like, when I had an interracial group of, you know, civil rights activists, I would have a white, you know, female civil rights activist, and then I would have a black female civil rights activist and a white male activist. Black. She would have me take all of the black people out of the picture, and so I had to do it. But did I want to do it? No. I'm working on a new children's book right now, and I think that's my best way of recourse, is to say, like, I don't ever want to get in this situation as an artist again, and I kind of want to share this story just to, like, to tell young artists and artists everywhere, like, that this can happen. Your art can be, people can take the power out of your art contractually, and that's unethical and wrong. And so I think we need a lot more resources for young artists, especially young artists of color.
That actually kind of leads into a question. So, you know, a lot of working class artists listen to the show. It might be my main constituency. But excuse me. What advice would you give to, you know, like a young artist, or particularly like a young black artist, to avoid these kind of pitfalls? Because, you know, let's not put the onus entirely on like this one particular instance in Traverse City. When art and commerce meets, a lot of times there are these kind of insensitive demands on the artist to, you know, somehow sacrifice their vision in order. It's like, well, the polls are up today, we need to ignore black people. Or the next week it's like, well, now everybody thinks we should put it in there. Oh, because again, publishers they're capitalists, they're not artists. So what advice would you have for, you know, maybe a young artist who could end up getting in the same situation that you did?
Well, I think that a lot of my career is based upon making more resources for young artists of color and just young artists in general. We're doing the Black Excellence Art Salon in January, on January 18th. That's featuring a lot of young artists of color in this area, and I'm allowing them to bring their work, price it at a good price, and start a conversation where we can network instead of being in competition with each other. But not only that, I was recently at a symposium at the KIA, and there was Belinda Tate, I believe. She's like the executive director, and people like Madeline Murphy-Rabb, who used to like run the Chicago Arts Council, and all of these amazing women of color who are running art. And what we talked about was the value of art. And if you don't value your art or think that it's valuable at first, people can take advantage of that, or outright steal from you, really. And that's the biggest issue, is that you need to reach out to other people in the arts who are like you and doing things like you. It's not an insult to your ego. It's not an insult to your work. It's important that you have connections with people who have worked on this similar things to you, because then you can ask things like, how do I price my work? What conversation should I have before this contract? And right now, working with Mamuel is very different than working with Laura Cobb, because they are allowing me to tell a story about being Black and a woman and achieving your rights and resisting at the same time through my culture. And we need to be giving our money to people like that, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Deep down in the cockles of my heart. Yeah. So we're about that time for break. As I say, anything else that you wanted to say, and also if you could include in there, maybe like where can people come see your art? The nearest, soonest opportunity, I guess it would be.
All right. Well, there's my Instagram. My Instagram is at Maya James Art, MayaJamesArt. And then also, you can check out my work. It's all over town. I'm gonna have some stuff at Midtown Fresh next week.
Right after you're done picking out your bagels and your fresh produce, go look at some beautiful outlook.
Civil House Coffee, and then it is, let me get it my calendar real quick, I'm sorry. December 5th. Or no, December 6th. I am going to be at the Arab American National Museum, and I'm going to be giving a talk kind of about the things we're talking about, resistance and being a marginalized person and making money off of your business. So, yeah, that's a lot of opportunities to see me. Or you can just look me up, Maya James Art, on Google. Pretty simple.
Well, Maya, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Sharing your story about. Glad we could help you call out that particular BS, because that is definitely some BS.
You're the greatest, Andy.
I'm all right. It's just a cranky old millennial trying to drop some truth bombs and make the world a little bit better place.
Be cranky.
Yeah. All right, y'all are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Dreaming, and you're listening to
89.1
WIDR
Kalamazoo. All right, let's just.
Depression can take many forms. It can feel like static in your brain, or as if everything around you has lost meaning. It can debilitate even the strongest of people. 89.1 WIDR is here to tell you that there is help and a way to improve mental health. WMU offers counseling for all students in the greater Kalamazoo community at Syndicuse Health Center. There is no need for an appointment for first-time visits. Open counseling times are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Syndicuse is located at 1903 West Michigan Avenue, Kalamazoo. For more information, please call 269-387-3287 or visit www.wmich.edu/health center.
We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Bonnie's going to be here for a few more minutes, so I thought I'm going to just put her completely on the spot and have her help me be co-host. Excuse me. So, yeah, give us a political dissertation on this topic now. No, I'm just kidding. No. And more like banter. If you have some banter or some insight analysis, let us know. All right, so I have again, we've got some international news later that is of the bad sort. So I wanted to, there is some good news in the pipeline here at the state level. I wanted to. This goes into the pluses column for Gretchen Whitmer, and actually last few stories we've done about her have been pretty good. Last week we were talking about her efforts to make sure that contracted employees can get overtime, or at least some of them, the working class ones in particular. So this week, and this is praised by a few local community activists, I know a lot of people I know near in this town that work on domestic violence issues. Very happy about this. There are definitely some ways it could be pushed a little further, of course, but here it is. This is an article I'm reading from the one published by WLNS, but you can find it on MLive just about anywhere. Governor Whitmer signs bill to protect victims of domestic violence, and this was written by Megan Shalong. It was published on November 8th. Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed Senate Bill 257 today to require deferred domestic violence charges to count as prior convictions and concurrent cases. Domestic violence is an epidemic that affects thousands of people across Michigan every day, Whitmer said. We have a duty to listen and respond to the needs of all Michiganders. That is why I am proud to sign this bill that will help protect victims of domestic violence and moves us a step closer to ending domestic violence in our state. The bill also gives the courts permission to order certain domestic violence offenders to participate in treatment court programs. The bill was originally sponsored by Senator Stephanie Chang out of Detroit. So that was kind of a short article, but I did kind of want to talk about the implications of this. It's important. So the way it works right now, and like the laws around domestic violence in this state, in most of the country, are really asinine and don't really do much to protect the actual. I hate using the V word. The targets of abuse. So what does that actually do on the ground? So requiring deferred domestic violence charges to count as prior convictions. That means if it's on their record, it will count as a legitimate and legal bits, of domestic violence. And this is the way a lot of abusers can kind of work their way around the system in order to perpetuate and continue their cycles of abuse. Also, I think it's very important when we're talking about this issue. Excuse me. That the whole thing with treatment programs. Toxic masculinity is a hell of a drug, and often what happens, and again, it's difficult for these cases to actually get prosecuted in the first place. Right. A lot of times, communities will outright ignore it, or again, a lot of people when you're the target of domestic violence, that comes with a lot of gaslighting and psychological manipulation, and police are notoriously light-handed when it comes to prosecuting these crimes, and it might have something to do with the fact that 40% of police abuse their partners. So this, the treatment piece, I think, is really important too, and especially in I'll just say I think for younger men in particular, and granted I do see a lot of the Gen Z boys seem to have their head on a little bit better than when we were growing up, but we as in me, my generation, I'm like 32. But particularly having, therapeutic intervention, especially early on, it's like, most of these men, historically, it's not been ever explained that, actually what you're doing is bad, it's wrong, it's abusive, and then, a lot of times they'll just hop on and try to, find the next target.
Yeah. And I feel like at the same time, it's exactly what you're saying, but like, how many people are really going to report domestic violence in the first place? It's really ingrained in our society and our media, like, to kind of internalize the abuse that's being thrown at us. So in what cases are people going to consider what's happening to them abuse, and then like in what cases are they actually going to like be convicted if like along with the police like misunderstanding? So yeah, I think like you can't it is a good step, let's not get it wrong, but I think like you said, a lot of this falls outside of the arena of criminal justice, for the reasons we just talked about, and also just a lot of it is a huge cultural problem. Men are still getting away with this stuff. Let's be clear, not just men are this, but a lot of it. Statistically, it's mostly men. All right, and if, somebody with a fedora is about to run into the studio. It's not all men. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've come a long way, baby, like genuinely, because it took us till the 70s, 60s, late 60s to actually call domestic violence what it is. So like in terms of helping people who have experienced this kind of like abuse, we're really behind. So the fact that we have this bill is really important, and we've made it like pretty far, but at the same time we're behind in general, so we have to work double time to kind of make up for that.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I think it is good at least to have like better structural protections, because a lot of the problem is, again, cultural, or even just the fact that these won't get prosecuted by a lot of like police and law enforcement. But hold it down, like I know situations where judges around here have like failed to renew PPOs after like a 1 year state, and they have like very specific things about what qualifies as like imminent danger. So like I've known people who's like PPO gets renounced, the next day they're getting stalked and harassed and assaulted all over again. The legal system, particularly here in the state of Michigan, but really all over the country, just is not equipped or designed to really deal with domestic violence in any substantive way.
Yeah.
So with that, I think let's go to another local news story. Hold on. This is, I guess this is good news depending on who you are. Probably not the kind of person who listens to this show, I'll tell you that one. But we're going to talk about our favorite county treasurer. Oh, good.
Oh, my goodness. Look at that face.
She's just so happy.
She is like, I am happy. So happy.
So this is a follow-up to a story that we talked about a few months ago. This is from MLive. Investigation into Kalamazoo County Treasurer's Office closed with no charges filed. So that's all from 2015. Okay. I can tell why she's happy, because she was a Trump delegate, and she's all like, things are going well for us.
Money.
For us and the fascists.
Dollar bills, y'all.
Yep. As the song goes, cash rules everything around me. Anyway. This was written by Brad Devereaux. It was published November 12th. An investigation into accounting practices at the Kalamazoo County Treasurer's Office has been closed, and with no charges being filed, the Michigan State Police said Tuesday. In October 2018, the Michigan State Police Special Investigations Section at 5th District Headquarters opened an investigation of Kalamazoo County Tax Reversion Fund expenditures, the transfer of foreclosed properties to private individuals and nonprofit organizations, and the payment to contractors who facilitated the rehabilitation of the properties. This is quoted from Mary. To be clear, I have at all times and in all areas followed Michigan law, Kalamazoo County Treasurer Mary Balkema said Tuesday in a prepared statement. I remain proud of my record as the Kalamazoo County Treasurer. The mission and focus of myself, along with those in my office, has always remained and will continue to remain the same, preventing foreclosure and keeping people in their homes, connecting families and resources to maintain home ownership, reducing blight, investing in the tax base, and serving all taxpayers of Kalamazoo County. So before I go on and give you all the context, little deeper context of what this is all about, just a couple reminders. So she's not legally guilty of anything, but as of I last checked, yes, she is still a racist capitalist. And, I don't say that lightly. There's been provable accusations of her kicking particularly black folks out of their homes. There was that instance several years ago. There was a blind gentleman. I think it was a property over on the north side. And this is a matter of public record. She literally asked, is he black?
Why is that always the thing? I'm sorry, but with the whole founders thing, it's like, I don't know if they're actually black. I haven't met their mom. Like, it doesn't, really? Did they say that in Jim Crow? Like, when we were walking into the white bathrooms, were they like, oh, I'll have to meet your mom and find out if you're actually not black? Yes. No, they would just lynch you. So that's complete crap.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
complete crap.
Yeah, I think she was like asking that as a determining factor. It's like, if he is, then yeah, let's go ahead and kick him out. Yeah, I can definitely get away with it. And yeah, the idea of preventing foreclosure, connecting families with resources to maintain home, reducing blight. Now, to her credit, she actually has done a little bit of work in the last year, helping with foreclosures. I think it's one of those, I call it like the public pressure effect. And what that means is a lot of people were paying very, very, very close attention to what Mary is doing, particularly after these years and years and years of various accusations. So she did a lot of work, helping put together things like Vibrant Kalamazoo and doing this program to reduce foreclosures, because it gets to a certain point where, you get that much deserved bad PR, you do actually have to do something good in order to, keep your seat. In this case, the kind of property monopoly she's been running out of with the county land bank for several years. So, in that sense, she has. Although reducing blight, this one stings for me a little bit. I think in an article less than about a year ago, she made very public complaints about. It's like, well, I don't want families or squatters in my houses. I don't. And this is around the time that the polar vortex was happening.
For squatters.
Yeah. Yeah. So
wow.
It's like, yeah, because God forbid. Somebody can, prevent themselves from freezing to death by, breaking into one of your empty houses, Mary.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Tell you what. How about this? I'm just gonna chat because I know some of these people listen to the show. I will stay off Mary's back for the next 6 months if use some of that county land bank stuff to build a municipal homeless shelter. How about that? How about that, as they say on Dr. Phil. So let me go ahead and now that I've told you that, it's a good, reminder of what Mary's all about. Here's what she was being investigated about. So on September 7th, 2018, former Kalamazoo County Corporation Counsel, try to say that 5 times fast, Elizabeth White, met with Michigan State Police and Prosecutor Jeff Gettings' office to discuss financial transactions involving the Treasurer's Office and County Land Bank. State Police opened an investigation after White provided records of home foreclosures, auctions, and county expense accounts. By the way, this side note, but this is another perfectly legal thing that Mary Balkema does as county treasurer. She started bundling a lot of these properties together. It used to be that it wouldn't be that hard if you were trying to buy a house on the north side or in the Edison. It'd be affordable because, again, those houses, they're not super expensive, and, a working person, especially if it's a fixer-upper, could conceivably get it. She started what she did, she started bundling a lot of these properties together, so the only people who could really afford it are big property management companies who have a lot of upfront capital. So, just a little side note there. Again, county land bank, profit-making enterprise, etc. Kalamazoo County government officials were cooperative during the investigation, including Treasurer Mary Balkema in her office, etc., etc. Michigan State Police Lieutenant Chuck Christensen said police focused on accounting abnormalities in the Treasurer's office. MSP investigators consulted with the Michigan Attorney General Public Corruption Unit in the investigation. The MSP always strives to complete all investigations concerning individuals and entities in a fair and impartial manner. In an investigation such as this, it is paramount importance that cooperation and transparency by all parties with information are cooperative and forthcoming to ensure a thorough and complete probe. The investigation documents previously released to MLive, their Kalamazoo Gazette, through FOIA, show Balkema, a Republican, paid a single contractor almost $500,000 for work on properties since 2011. Allowed contractors to avoid paying sales tax by using county credit accounts, and used proceeds of property sales to buy thousands of dollars in outdoor furniture, clothing, and transportation to a conference in Wisconsin. The nearly 800 pages of documents include receipts from purchases made to the county's tax reversion fund, records of property transfers from the treasurer's office to outside groups and individuals, and more than 100 pages of receipts showing tens of thousands of dollars in purchases from Lowe's made by her staff. On Wednesday, November 6th, Kalamazoo County Board of Commissioners voted to fire White and did not provide a reason for her termination. By the way, big thanks again to Maya for coming on the show. She has to skedaddle, but yeah. By the way, yeah, I didn't get a chance to really dig into that, but that's also pretty dubious, isn't it? So, so I think what we really have here is more or less a case of, and almost reminds me, so Mary Balkema has been kind of a, what's the word? I don't want to say punching bag or something like that, but deservedly, she's always kind of had this, liberal, progressive, quote unquote, Kalamazoo. She's the only local politician who you could really say is definitely far right conservative, And, that's not me talking Trump delegates, taking selfies with Joe Arpaio at a time when most local Republicans were very much trying to distance themselves from Trump and his administration. But, a lot of people, a lot of the liberals who follow local politics, they've been hoping for some way to oust Mary Balkema for a while now. It's been tough to get a really strong candidate, and again, she has a lot of power in the city and the county. She's got a lot of connections. So, if you want to compare it to national politics, I felt this investigation is almost it reminds me a local example of the impeachment hearings. A lot of or Russiagate, let's say, where everybody, all the local liberals, all the social justice people, all the anti-capitalist people are well, maybe not the anti-capitalist people. We're a little too cynical for that, but we're all of course she's gonna get off scot-free. Well, a lot of people were hoping it's well, this will be the investigation. This is what's gonna do it. This is what's gonna get Mary Balkema knocked out of the seat. No, sorry, that's not how it works. Because, and you know what? Again, MLive brings up some very good points. This is all very ethically dubious. But does it follow the letter of the law? And fact of the matter is, I will say on Mary Balkema's part, she's certainly a heck of a lot more intelligent than our current president. She knows how to, use the system to her advantage without actually breaking any, laws. There's a reason she's been the county treasurer for as long as she has. So, yeah, in the legal arena, no, you're probably not going to be able to take down a corrupt official through those channels. Again, Barry Balkema's worst crime is being a very, very efficient capitalist. And we live in a capitalist system. We live in a city and a county that rewards that kind of behavior. So, that's kind of where we're at. I hope everybody wasn't, hedging their bets too closely on that. So, my two recommendations, like Mary Balkema, again, I do think she is starting to do some good stuff. I think that's because of all the public pressure. Keep that on strong and keep seeing some decent work out of her in the land bank. I'd recommend the County Democratic Party find somebody who can oust her. I know last time Sunny Sahu tried to. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. That wasn't a very good election for anyone, 2016. But either Sunny or somebody stronger. If I find a really good candidate and sink a lot of resources into that race. Or, again, like the biggest problem with Balkema, strip it all away, is using the county land bank as a profit-making capitalist enterprise, which, frankly, is how many county land banks around the country do operate. Because, with the exception of a few kind of, social democrats or democratic socialists, who often don't even run for seats like treasurer, that's kind of the status quo around the country. It's just, Mary's work is a little more noticeable because she really pushes against the line of what is legal, and she also really will just, profit over people. So they're, values wise. So those are my big recommendations, but I honestly, if you want to inhibit the power of the county land bank, it's not even so much about Mary Balkema. We need to, that is we the people. I very much believe we should start our own land bank, like a people's land bank. There was some discussion about it around the election, but what do the capitalists say? Give the county land bank some, competition there in the free market. See how well it does. Well, anyway, I think with that, let's go ahead and take a quick break. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
It's Ian from Double Island, and you're listening to 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo.
Hello, everyone. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, the only source for political revolution. So, let us start the hour. We're going to dive into some very important international stories. Just kind of south of the border, down Mexico way, down to South America, South Central America. So we've got a couple of very important stories about what's going on down there politically. There's some good news and there's some bad news. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I'll start with the good news first. For the two high-profile stories, I'm going to be talking about, Lula is out of jail. I'm going to be talking about Bolivia, probably for quite a bit. It is a very complicated situation down there. Well, actually, it's not all that complicated. It's another right-wing CIA-backed coup, but we've got a lot to talk about. So why don't we start with the good news? I do want to mention, before we dive into the story about Lula, the protests in Chile are still going strong. I think with everything else that's been going on in that part of the world, a lot of people have forgotten that. But the kind of lefty protests going on in Chile are still going. And I saw some really cool, graffiti. It said something like, neoliberalism was born in Chile and it will die here. Because if you don't know the history of Chile, Salvador Allende was a very famous democratic socialist, was assassinated there in 9/11/73, I believe it was. And then a real rotten, villainous POS named Pinochet got elected. He didn't get elected. He took power and then famously threw leftist organizers out of helicopters. If you ever see a right-winger making helicopter jokes, that's where that comes from. Anyway, let's start with the good news. So, a lot of y'all don't know, in Brazil, the Brazil election in an alternate universe could have gone in a very different direction. A very popular politician, Democratic Socialist Lula Livre, was running. A lot of people thought he was a shoo-in, and then he got sent to jail on some trumped-up charges, and then, ergo vis-a-vis, a very Trumpian presidential candidate, Jair Bolsonaro, ended up becoming president and did all of the fun things that he ended up doing, such as burning down the Amazon rainforest. But Lula is free. So let's talk about what that means. This is from Jacobin, the lefty kind of DemSoc magazine. And this is by Victor Marquez. And the title of this article is Lula Livre was just the beginning. And I wanted to read this article in particular because it really goes into some of the social and economic implications of Lula, both being free, going to jail, etc. So, Lula is finally out of jail, although as both Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn made clear yesterday, he should have never been there in the first place. It has become increasingly evident that Lula never had a fair trial. He was, in fact, a political prisoner, a victim of lawfare, the manipulation of judicial institutions for politically motivated persecution. Since Lula's imprisonment, documents released by Glenn Greenwald, AGG, and The Intercept have shown that the judge and prosecutors were colluding, constructing the case together, and calculating their actions for maximum mediatic and political impact. Again, to make a comparison, let's say in 2016, let's say Bernie Sanders actually got the nomination, was facing off against Donald Trump, and then some prosecutor connected to the Trump administration brought a bunch of made-up charges against Bernie Sanders and put him in prison right before the election. That's kind of what happened in Brazil. The messages show that then Judge Sergio Moro, now Minister of Justice in the extreme right-wing government of Jair Bolsonaro, the dude got a promotion, instructing and advising the prosecution at the same time that he was publicly pretending to be neutral and a technical arbiter. It is now clear, as former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, has recently stated in an interview to Jacobin, if Lula hadn't been jailed, he would be president of Brazil. But instead, we have the fascist Jair Bolsonaro as president, and the judge who jailed Lula is a minister. Armed with this new information, Lula is now waging a judicial battle to annul the whole trial, as Sergio Moro could not be regarded as an impartial judge. But that is not why Lula was released this Friday. On Thursday night, the Brazilian Supreme Court finished its much-anticipated deliberation on whether defendants could be imprisoned before appeals to higher courts had been exhausted. On a 6-5 vote, the court ruled that such incarceration was unlawful until final appeals were exhausted, which is, in fact, what the Constitution states quite clearly. Less than 24 hours later, Lula was speaking to a euphoric red crowd outside the federal police headquarters after 580 days of imprisonment. This is not the first time that Lula was in prison. He was sent to jail almost 40 years ago while Brazil was still under military dictatorship. Then, Lula was leading the largest industrial worker strike in the country's history. It goes into some biographical information. I'm going to go ahead and skip a good chunk of that. But I'll talk a little bit about what's going on here. So, why do elites still fear Lula? It's common to hear in Brazil that Lula arouses a kind of instinctual class hatred on a sub-rational level. The wealthy few don't really have anything to fear from Lula, after all he governed with them, but they cannot but despise him for his humble origins and manual worker background. Maybe there is something to that, but the street party that spontaneously erupted after his release, the enthusiasm that many in the working poor still feel towards him, point to another explanation. Lula symbolizes the menace of working-class politics. It is no coincidence that he chose the building of his trade union, the metalworkers' trade union, as a bunker to rally his supporters during the days just before his imprisonment. And no coincidence that it's to that trade union that he returned after leaving prison. It is there, surrounded by workers and activists, that Lula feels most at home. It was in that trade union, Lula sometimes says, that his life acquired meaning. In his last speech before going to prison, Lula comforted the crowd from the metalworkers trade union by saying, "The powerful few may kill 1, 2, or 3 roses, but they can never stop the spring from coming, and our struggle is for the spring." Yesterday, we saw roses of solidarity coming from committed left leaders around the globe, such as Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn, and Barcelona's mayor, Ada Colau. But in Brazil, we are still searching for the spring. Under an authoritarian government that becomes ever more repressive as it doubles down on austerity policies, privatization, and precarization, we will need as much international solidarity as possible. The Brazilian working class and the left are under attack of a vicious political project that is globally articulated with the most reactionary currents in the world. We can only beat the populist right with an international working class movement. Our weapon is solidarity, and our struggle is international. So that is some legitimately good news for the people of Brazil. You know, personally, I hope Lula seems to kind of have a role in Brazil similar to, say, like Bernie Sanders. I would love to see Lula run again and beat Jair Bolsonaro in an open election. Or, just the Amazon forest could come alive and just beat Bolsonaro to a bloody pulp. Either way, I just touched the cockles of my heart. Excuse me. Sorry, funny thing, I had a cold right around Halloween, and I've mostly gotten over it, but I've had this runny nose that just, yeah. I think a lot of people are getting down with the sickness lately. Be careful. Wash your hands. All that good stuff. So, before we do more of the Latin America stuff, or you know what? Never mind. I will get to that after. There has been some local stuff come up around school shootings, and I did want to get to that story, but let's take a really quick break. I'm gonna go use the little radicals room, and then we'll deep dive into the situation going on in Bolivia, which ain't good, folks. There are a few bits of light on the horizon, but I'll break it down for everybody as soon as I get back. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
gentlemen, Trey Marks and Ryan Payton.
Thank you very much, everyone. We are the members of Quantum Fleek. It's a secret. It's now out. There are no others jamming today. All right, folks. It's time for more.
We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. So let's talk about Bolivia. And I want to start. So there's been a lot of confusion around this issue, and I've seen for some of the lefties and anarchists I know, there was kind of a knee-jerk reaction. I think people are starting to understand a little bit more about what this quote-unquote uprising in Bolivia was actually about. But there's this thought, it's like, oh, popular revolution against a guy who mucked up or was corrupted in an election. You know, I guess this is good news. No, it's not. Let's explain what happened, and I'm going to use kind of an analogy. I'm going to tell you all a story, kind of bring it home what's going on in Bolivia right now. Now, I want you to imagine something. So imagine we were in a situation where the United States just re-elected a very popular Native American activist in an election. And let's suppose, just to make it more of a valid comparison, right before this, some legislation was passed allowing for extra term limits. So, by the way, that was only passed after FDR took several, I think he was president for 4 terms or something. So that was in response to a very popular kind of social democrats. Not that FDR didn't have his own problems, but just so you understand a little context here. So, really popular Native American activist here in the United States won re-election by a 10-point margin. Very rarely are those kind of margins possible in the United States to happen, but that was the margin that Morales had. Now, imagine that this president made leaps and bounds in creating social equity. He was a true democratic socialist whose policies improved the quality of life for the masses of people living in the United States. He was a thoroughly anti-racist president who addressed the grievances of our native and black populations. It was an administration so concerned about climate change that they sent their own firefighters to put out the blaze in the Amazon against the wishes of Brazil's Bolsonaro. Now imagine that right-wingers in the U.S., the MAGA folks, 3%ers, Proud Boys, neo-Nazis, etc., started engaging in massive acts of violence and terrorism. Let's say Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gets dragged into the street, and a fascist crowd douses her in red paint and chops off her hair. Ilhan's house gets firebombed. Leftist organizers across the country are being assaulted and outright murdered. The right-wingers claim that the most recent election was fraudulent. Keep in mind, a lot of them say that about the last one, even though, if anything, it was right-wing voter suppression that won Trump that seat to begin with. This Native American president goes so far as to offer to hold re-elections. The right-wingers, they get the support of the U.S. military, and they threaten to kill the president's sister. The president reluctantly resigns, and the right-wing military coup starts purging the United States Congress of anyone they consider too far left. That's, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentledom, that is precisely what just happened in Bolivia. That is exactly what happened in Bolivia. You know, that mental image of like AOC being dragged in the street, that was a popular socialist mayor. She was dragged into the street by this right-wing opposition. They threw red paint over her and chopped off her hair in the middle of the public square. There's video footage of it if you feel like stomaching it. This came about a week after Morales made it clear that he was nationalizing the country's lithium reserves, was not going to basically play ball with, what's the name of it? International Monetary Fund, IMF. There you go. So this is a story we've seen in South America and Latin America time and time and time again, and for the international left, the international socialists, it is a real kick to the gut. And this right-wing coup is led by people who are explicitly anti-indigenous, explicitly racist. I'm going to pull up a couple of things in particular here. So we've got a couple articles that we're going to be citing from that talk about the Bolivia situation. But I want to focus a little bit on explaining who this opposition is, who are the people that just, threw Morales out, or, Morales resigned basically to stop the violence. The right-wingers were literally going around murdering and terrorizing socialists and indigenous activists all over the country. We've seen reports since the coup was successful. The flag, which represented the indigenous people of Bolivia, which makes up about 60% of the population, was lowered. Local law enforcement and military were seen tearing off their patches that have the indigenous symbolism on there. There's some graffiti on the streets that said, death to Indians, death to natives. And here's Janine Áñez, the senator, Bolivian senator, who just assumed power through no actual democratic apparatus, by the way. She is quoted as saying, "I dream of a Bolivia free of indigenous satanic rites. The city is not for Indians. They better go to the highlands or El Chaco." That was Senator Janine Áñez. She said this on her Twitter account about her country, where more than 65% of the population is indigenous. And this is the woman who just assumed power, who basically, if Jair Bolsonaro and Ann Coulter had a satanic love child, that's basically who is now running the show. Who is behind this coup? Well, we're going to read from an article here that explains a little bit more of the character of the people who are actually behind this. It's from the Orinoco Tribune. This is written by Max Blumenthal and Ben Norton. They're the very well-known left-wing journalists here in the United States, the Gray Zone Project, and etc. So this is published on November 12th. Article has the headline, "Bolivia coup led by Christian fascist paramilitary leader and millionaire, and foreign support." When Luis Fernando Camacho stormed into Bolivia's abandoned presidential palace in the hours after President Evo Morales' sudden November 10th resignation, he revealed to the world a side of the country that stood at stark odds with the plurinational spirit its deposed socialist indigenous leader had put forward. With a Bible in one hand and a national flag in the other, Camacho bowed his head in prayer above the presidential seal, fulfilling his vow to purge his country's native heritage from government and, quote-unquote, return God to the presidential palace. As he said, referring to the Andean mother spirits, Bolivia belongs to Christ. Bolivia's extreme right-wing opposition had overthrown leftist President Evo Morales that day, following demands by the country's military leadership that he step down. Virtually unknown outside his country, where he had never won a democratic election, Camacho stepped into the void. He is a powerful multimillionaire named in the Panama Papers and an ultra-conservative Christian fundamentalist groomed by a fascist paramilitary notorious for its racist violence, with a base in Bolivia's wealthy separatist region of Santa Cruz. Camacho hails from a family of corporate elites who have long profited from Bolivia's plentiful natural gas reserves, and his family lost part of its wealth when Morales nationalized the country's resources in order to fund his vast social programs, which cut poverty by 42% and extreme poverty by 60%. In the lead-up to the coup, Camacho met with leaders from right-wing governments in the region to discuss their plans to destabilize Morales. 2 months before the push, he tweeted gratitude, "Thank you, Colombia. Thank you, Venezuela," he exclaimed, tipping his hat to Juan Guaido's coup operation. He also recognized the far-right government of Jair Bolsonaro, declaring, "Thank you, Brazil." Camacho had spent years leading an overtly fascist separatist organization called the Union Juvenil Crucionista. The Gray Zone edited the following clips from a promotional historical documentary that the group posted on its own social media accounts. While Camacho and his far-right forces served as the muscle behind the coup, their political allies waited to reap the benefits. The presidential candidate Bolivia's opposition had fielded in the October election, Carlos Mesa, is a pro-business privatizer with extensive ties to Washington. U.S. government cables published by WikiLeaks reveal that he regularly corresponded with American officials in their efforts to stabilize Morales. Mesa is currently listed as an expert at the Inter-American Dialogue, a D.C.-based think tank funded by the U.S. government's soft power arm USAID, various oil giants, and a host of multinational corporations active in Latin America. Evo Morales, a former farmer who rose to prominence in social movements before becoming the leader of the powerful grassroots political party movement towards socialism, was Bolivia's first indigenous leader. Wildly popular with the country's substantial native and peasant communities, he won numerous elections and democratic referenda over a 13-year period, often in landslides. On October 20th, Morales won re-election by more than 600,000 votes, giving him just above the 10% margin needed to defeat opposition presidential candidate Mesa in the first round. Experts who did a statistical analysis of Bolivia's publicly available voting data found no evidence of irregularities or fraud. But the opposition claimed otherwise and took to the streets in weeks of protest and riots. And by the way, that is the official line that the U.S. government is taking, is that the governments were fraudulent, even though they have been scientifically and statistically studied. And there was no evidence of malfeasance. There was, you might see rocking around that there was a report from, the Election Integrity, some Democratic organization, but as has been pointed out, they made these allegations with literally no evidence, whereas, impartial, neutral groups that have gone in and actually studied the data found that there was nothing fishy about the election. A lot of people say it's like, oh, well, Morales, he was behind, and then he suddenly started getting all these votes out of nowhere. Well, they weren't out of nowhere. If you actually looked at how the election returns panned out, the later results came from a lot of the poorer indigenous areas where Morales has his largest base of support. So it statistically tracks with what you would expect from those areas. I'm going to go back to the article. The events that precipitated the resignation of Morales were indisputably violent. Right-wing opposition gangs attacked numerous elected politicians from the ruling leftist MAS party. They then ransacked the home of President Morales while burning down the houses of several other top officials. The family members of some politicians were kidnapped and held hostage until they resigned. A female socialist mayor was publicly tortured by a mob. Following the forced departure of Morales, coup leaders arrested the president and vice president of the government's electoral body and forced the organization's other officials to resign. Camacho's followers proceeded to burn We Follow flags that symbolize the country's indigenous population and the plurinational vision of Morales. The Organization of American States, a pro-U.S. organization founded by Washington during the Cold War as an alliance of right-wing anti-communist countries in Latin America, helped rubber stamp the Bolivian coup. It called for new elections, claiming there were numerous... Oh, this is the group I was talking about earlier. Claiming there were numerous irregularities in the October 20th vote without citing any evidence. Then the OAS remained silent as Morales was overthrown by his military and his party's officials were attacked and violently forced to resign. The day after, the Donald Trump White House enthusiastically praised the coup, trumping it as a significant moment for democracy. So it goes a little bit deeper into specific, like who Camacho is in particular. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, back down to kind of some more broader information. But yeah, if you read the whole article, this dude is definitely a scumbag. Camacho, he's with these right-wing groups, a lot of them deeply racist, some of them like making Nazi salutes and just following the fascist playbook. But yeah, again, this article does a really good deep dive into who this dude is and his own history. But yeah, basically some of the worst elements of the Latin American far right were behind this coup, and basically they were very much trying to quell what Morales has done in his country, which is, again, by any metric, he's lifted thousands and thousands of people out of poverty. He's really made it a far better country than it was when he first stepped in. And, here's another thing that we should remember. This goes back to old school imperialism. But with kind of some new objectives. So, big thing to remember, there is a material resource at play here. And what material resource is that? Lithium. Bolivia has unprecedented access and easy to find reserves of lithium. That was the thing that the Bolivian government under Morales was nationalizing for the good of the people. Lithium is a key component in electric cars, electric batteries. If you follow a lot of left Twitter and left book, you'll see a lot of people talking about the transition of this is what green capitalism means. Instead of war for oil, wars for lithium and other rare earth minerals that go into, again, things like electric cars. And, make no mistake, that is more or less exactly what is going down here. And, I was gonna... Hold on. So... yeah, it's, again, very sad. We've already, kind of like what happened with Venezuela, we're already starting to see moneyed interests here in the States kind of start salivating over access to, this lithium material. So, yeah, it does, in fact, go back to that same old, CIA, backs a coup in Latin America. That is definitely no good. And it's for a valued resource. And, this is tough times. We really need to have solidarity with our brothers and sisters and non-binary folks down in Bolivia, because my best guess, this violence ain't going to stop just because the right wing is ascended power. If anything, they've more or less indicated that it's going to increase. These people deeply hate the indigenous population that, again, is the vast majority of the population. It's probably in their designs to recreate some sort of apartheid state up in Bolivia and sell off lithium to the highest bidder. But it's not all bad news, and, the full article is not in English, so I can't really read it, but Bolivia is fighting back. I found this, just this post, and it's just a brief translation of some of the article here. The Executive Committee of the Trade Union Confederation of Peasant Workers of Bolivia issued an ultimatum regarding the conflict in Bolivia and announced that they have encircled the seat of government and have given 48 hours to the president of the right-wing pro-Santa Cruz Committee, Fernando Camacho, to leave the city of La Paz. And this is from their statement. The CSUTCB instructs the 9 departmental and 26 regional federations to carry out the siege of the city of La Paz, giving Mr. Fernando Camacho a 48-hour ultimatum to retreat with his contracted and violent people from the Crucienta Juvenile Union. Otherwise, they will be responsible for all the acts that are registered. So the left in Bolivia is fighting back, but they've got a very well-funded, very, very violent right-wing opposition that has just basically enacted a, for now, successful coup of the Morales government. I say if you're a religious or spiritual person, pray for Bolivia, and I would recommend just, lending them whatever material support is possible. But yeah, things don't look so great for the people down there. And, especially at a time like this, keep in mind, Evo Morales and his government was putting out fires in the Amazon at a time where, Bolsonaro was encouraging farmers to burn it down so that he could clear land for raising cattle. We can't afford to lose Morales and the government he represents. They're on the front lines of... I'm wondering, if the human race actually makes it through all this crazy climate stuff in the next few decades. Morales, a lot of times small actions can big things, Would that action, him putting out those forest fires in the Amazon, could that have been the precious thing we needed to buy us some time for that, climate crisis revolution that we need? I don't know. But he's done a fundamentally incredible favor for the whole human race. And we all need to stand in solidarity with Morales and the people of Bolivia and hope that this coup does not pan out and that they do not actually get to maintain the power that they have seized through violence and terrorism. So I think with that, we're going to go to break. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
You're listening to 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo.
It may not be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. So we're going to close out with one last local story, and this shook through, actually the whole Southwest Michigan community to an extent. And it is and is not about school shootings, but wanted to give y'all an update. If you were a parent on Friday, you probably heard or saw there was a threat against Loy Norrix High School. Some kid was talking about shooting up the school in the morning, tired of being bullied. And then there were a bunch of copycats that happened. I'll go ahead and read from the article, then we'll discuss it a little bit. This is published by Kayla Miller, posted November 12th. Teen arrested after online threat closes Kalamazoo schools, sparks copycat cases. Police arrested a teenager who they say was behind the first online threat to Kalamazoo schools that caused a string of copycat threats. A 14-year-old Kalamazoo resident, who police did not name, was identified as the suspect responsible for the online threat against Loy Norrix High School, according to a news release issued Tuesday night by local police and schools. The teenager was lodged at the Kalamazoo County Juvenile Home. The statement said the investigation is ongoing and additional suspects are being identified. The news release, So the first threat was made Sunday, leading to a closure Monday of Loy Norrix High School. By Monday morning, Kalamazoo Public Schools said more copycat threats were made, prompting the closure that day of Kalamazoo Central, Hillside, and Linden Grove Middle Schools. Investigators later determined that the threat against Loy Norrix was not credible. Unfortunately, the original incident resulted in multiple copycat threats throughout the region, authorities said in a statement issued Tuesday. On Tuesday, November 12th, Portage Public Schools closed schools on the northern campus after a threat was found against Portage Northern High School. Later Tuesday, Parchment High School released students early because of a threat found against the school. The criminal case against the 14-year-old will be presented to the Kalamazoo County Prosecutor's Office for review. Police said the crime of posting a terrorist threat, regardless of the intent or the capability of committing the act, is a felony, punishable by up to 20 years imprisonment or a maximum fine of $20,000. Here's the sad thing, y'all. We live in a culture that's very fearful of these kind of school shootings, unfortunately. And we've talked about this on the program quite a few times. This hits really close to home to me. Loy Norrix is where I went to high school. And it is pretty outrageous. This teenage kid thought he could just threaten the school. And I don't know what it was. Y'all think you can just get a snow day out of this stuff. And that a lot of other teenagers in the area say, hey, let's do that too. We can get a day after school. So I've got some advice for all you teenagers out there. We live in a surveillance state. They will figure out who you are, no matter how anonymous or whatever you want to make it. Just use your S posting account. That ain't gonna cut it. They're gonna find you. And two, yeah, you might get the day off of school, but then you could also end up in prison for a couple decades or have to pay $20,000. And keep in mind that is one of those offenses that they will charge a juvenile for. Particularly, I think, in this instance where you are basically threatening terrorism or trying to invoke the stochastic terrorism of school shootings in order to get a day off of school. People aren't going to have very much sympathy for that. And y'all really shouldn't do that. It's in very poor taste. It's gross. Just go and do the quiz, do the test anyway. It ain't worth it. It is not worth it. And really, look, I mean, God, that's just think how disrespectful that is too. Not to sound like a cranky old millennial or old man, I guess, but yeah, like, people your age are getting murdered and killed in schools because, alienation, late stage capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, etc. But you don't invoke that just to try to get a day off. Sorry, not sorry. So, that is just an update to what ended up happening here in the Kalamazoo regarding those threats. I wanted everybody to kind of find out what all that was about. So, with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and read the activist calendar, the organizers calendar to you, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up the program. So, on November 14th, That's Thursday at 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. For Michigan's future and the Michigan League of Conservation Voters and State Innovation Exchange are going to be holding an event over at the Kalamazoo First Congregational UCC. It's called The Value of Our Vote. It's an evening focused on understanding, exercising, and defending democracy rights in Michigan. There's going to be sessions on knowing your existing rights, understanding the new Prop 3 rights in Michigan, lessons from community activists on getting political, vote to voice, how to hold elected officials accountable, and what it means and how to get involved in your community. There'll be dinner provided. You can RSVP on Eventbrite or Facebook. And again, that's going to be Thursday from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Also coming up later on this weekend. Hold on here. On Friday, November 15th, over at Ascension at Borges Hospital, it's the 2019 Summit on Racism. This is an all-day summit from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can find it on Facebook. I'm not sure if they've still got availability, but if that interests you, please feel free to check it out. And then, let's see. On Monday, November 18th, it's the Michigan Students' Dream Potluck and Sanctuary Schools training. That's going to be at the Arab American National Museum. Oh, that's over in Detroit. Sorry. Well, yeah, if you look it up, it's over in Detroit. Sorry, sometimes I get invited to this stuff statewide. I still have a lot of connections to Lansing and Detroit activists. And then Monday, November 18th, over at the Vine Neighborhood Association at 7 p.m., Southwestern Michigan DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, are going to be having their November general meeting. So if you want to get down with some democratic socialism right here in Southwest Michigan, that would be the place to go. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show. I want to thank y'all for listening. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. And until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.